Tonight's story is about a man with a badge, a title, and apparently a whole lot of grace from a system that loves preaching accountability right up until one of their own gets caught in the middle of a scandal. We're talking about Freestone County Constable Kenneth Sessions. According to the records, complaints, redacted messages, and attorney statements provided in this case, Sessions was accused of sending unsolicited, explicit images tied to a criminal complaint in Limestone County, Texas, and publicly described as being thrown out of a mandatory training class after allegedly sexually harassing another woman there. And after all of that, he still got to keep walking around with a badge. So tonight, we are going through the paper trail, the court remarks, the emails, and the timeline, because this does not look like accountability. This looks like protection. So, buckle up, smash that like button, drop a comment, share this everywhere, follow us on Facebook for real-time updates, because sunlight is coming. And as always, sunlight is the best disinfectant.
Tyranny, corruption, extortion. Sunlight is the best disinfectant. BZ Watchdog News Network.
The central issue here is not just embarrassing behavior. It is abuse of authority, abuse of position, and the question of whether the system protects connected law enforcement officers when ordinary people would be destroyed for the same conduct. The TCOLE complaint intake form identifies the complaint as sending unsolicited pictures of his genitalia to women, lists Kenneth Sessions and identifies him as a peace officer and constable for Freestone County Precinct 4. The form cites Penal Code 42.07 subsection 7 and lists the offense level as a Class B misdemeanor. That is not internet gossip. That is a formal complaint document. And according to attorney David Moore's official statement, his client was a sexual assault survivor with PTSD who had only recently decided to return to work when she encountered Sessions. Moore says she is deeply disappointed that an elected official and licensed law enforcement officer could allegedly sexually harass two women within a 2-week period while keeping his credentials and authority. On April 1, 2026, attorney David Moore addressed Freestone County officials directly, and he did not mince words. He said that on December 17, 2025, he had already told the court about Sessions sexually harassing females. He said complaints were filed with TCOLE and the Texas Workforce Commissions. He stated that after conducting Sessions' private business, Sessions sent 2 different pictures of his genitalia to Moore's client, who was herself a prior survivor of sexual assault and abuse. Moore also told the court that on July 8, 2025, a criminal complaint was filed in Limestone County for unlawful transmission of sexually explicit visual material, and that less than 2 weeks later, on July 22, 2025, Sessions was thrown out of a training session in Tyler for sexually harassing a female there. That alone should have set off alarms across Freestone County, because at that point, there is no longer some isolated oops moment. That starts looking like a pattern. The TCOLE complaint narrative paints a picture that should have sent alarms through every office that claims to care about professionalism in law enforcement. The complaint says Ken Sessions was not only the elected constable, but also owned businesses. It says he advertised for a CDL driver, the complainant responded, and the interaction moved from hiring and work into harassment, inappropriate conduct, and later explicit images. It further states that after she quit because of continued sexual harassment, she still had issues getting paid, and that later Sessions contacted her about meeting up to pay her. Then, according to the complaint, weeks later he sent 2 pictures of his genitalia, and when she did not respond, started apologizing and blaming medication. So let me translate that into plain English. This wasn't just some random late-night exchange between strangers. According to the complaint, this involved a boss, a job, a worker, a power imbalance, and a badge sitting in the background of the whole thing. And if some ordinary man without a title got wrapped up in that kind of documented mess, nobody would be bending over backward to preserve his career. The redacted text chain matters because it shows the progression. It appears to begin as a work conversation. There are messages about the driving job, location, route, work details, and coming in. But as you keep going through the pages, the tone changes. What starts as job-related communication appears to drift into personal invitations, drinking, comments about other women, invitations to his cabin, and language that makes it look like her employment was getting tangled up with whether she would spend time with him. Then later, the same chain appears to show the aftermath, discomfort, leaving, and back and forth over getting paid. And that's the part courthouse people love pretending not to understand. Because when a woman is dealing with a man who is both her boss in private business and a public law enforcement official, that changes everything. That's not just flirting. That is leverage. That is authority hanging in the air, whether anybody wants to admit it or not. Now here is where the story blows past the excuse makers. According to David Moore's public remarks, Sessions was thrown out of a training session in Tyler on July 22nd after sexually harassing a female there. This is a second incident. Different woman, different setting, same name. And when something like that happens, while a criminal complaint is already hanging over somebody's head, the public has every right to ask whether this is a pattern. Because at some point, people have to stop insulting the intelligence of the public with this nothing to see here garbage. Now let's go to the part that should make every peace officer in Texas furious if the rules are supposed to apply equally. In his official statement, Moore said Sessions was removed from mandated training and did not attend another class. He said that without his 40-hour requirement, TCOLE would have been required to terminate his license. Instead, he says Sessions was allowed to watch videos at home and submit written summaries. One letter dated July 25, 2025 says DVDs were enclosed for the remaining continuing education for constable's course and tells Sessions he must complete the assignment and written summaries by August 21st. Another page shows Lemmet notifying TCOLE that his 40 hours were submitted and approved. There's also a roster amendment request changing the course hours from 0 to 40. So let me ask the obvious question. How many other officers get thrown out of a class for sexual harassment and then get to go home, pop in the DVDs, write a little homework assignment, and call it good? Because that sure doesn't sound like accountability to me. That sounds like a rescue plan. As if the story didn't already sink enough, then we get into the court handling. David Moore wrote that he was filing formal complaints with the State Commission on Judicial Conduct and the Attorney General regarding what he described as a Public Information Act violation involving records connected to Sessions' plea. And the response attributed to Judge Ray Jones was this: as soon as Mr. Sessions signs the paper for the deferment completion, I will send you what you asked for. Moore also stated in the email chain that the judge found Sessions guilty and then tried to defer probation, which Moore argued was not the normal way deferred adjudication is supposed to work. So now the public has another problem. Not just the conduct, not just the badge, not just the training. Now the public gets to wonder whether the court handling was just as soft as the rest of it. At this point, the system wants the public to believe all of this is just noise. But look at the timeline. One complainant tied to the job and explicit image complaint. Another woman tied to the Tyler training incident. A formal TCOLE complaint. A criminal case. Training accommodations. A judge email that raises new questions. And somehow through all of that, Kenneth Sessions still gets handled like somebody the system is trying very hard not to embarrass too badly. That doesn't look random. That looks familiar. Because this is what local government and law enforcement systems do when one of their own becomes a liability. Minimize, contain, delay, and hope the public gets bored. According to Moore's remarks to Commissioner Court, Sessions entered a plea after months of delay, and Moore said the judgment found him guilty and imposed only a short condition not to violate the law for 15 days. 15 days. That's what the public gets told as accountability. So let's be honest, if this had been somebody with no title, no courthouse relationships, and no law enforcement shield, does anybody really believe that outcome would have been this soft? Of course not. And that is why people are angry. not just because of the allegations, but because of the double standard. So here's what we know from the records in front of us. A formal complaint identified Kenneth Sessions as a peace officer and constable and described unsolicited explicit image allegations. A redacted message chain appears to show a job-related contact that becomes personal and inappropriate. David Moore tells Freestone County officials there were 2 incidents involving 2 women within a short time. Training records show Sessions was later allowed to complete coursework from home, and the judge email raises serious questions about how the records and disposition were handled. So Freestone County has some questions to answer. Why is Kenneth Sessions still wearing a badge? Why was he allowed to finish training from home after what was described publicly as harassment in class? Why was the punishment so light? And why does it keep looking like the people who are supposed to protect the public spent more energy protecting one of their own? This is exactly why people have lost trust in these systems. Because when regular citizens get accused, the hammer drops. But when the badge is on the other side of the table, suddenly everybody finds patience, discretion, and understanding. Should Kenneth Sessions still be a constable? Should TCOLE explain this publicly? Should the court handling be reviewed? So, buckle up, smash that like button, drop a comment, share this everywhere, follow us on Facebook for real-time updates because sunlight is coming. And as always, sunlight is the best disinfectant.
Tyranny, corruption, extortion. Sunlight is the best disinfectant. BZ Watchdog News Network.
BZ Watchdog.